This is CRM Audio, the Microsoft Power Platform and Dynamics 365 podcast. This episode is brought to you by Maplytics by Inogic, the market-leading certified for Dynamics 365 geo-analytical mapping app. Maplytics empowers users with powerful map visualizations and routing capabilities within Dynamics 365 to drive better sales, improve business processes, and engage the right customers at the right time. Find out more at maplytics.com. And by Dynamics 365 User Group. Across the globe, Dynamics 365 User Group members share a common goal of maximizing and advancing the performance of Dynamics 365 customer engagement, finance and operations, and the Power Platform. Together, individuals and companies can improve operations, overcome obstacles, and exceed goals. Find out more at d365ug.com. And we're back with another episode focused on Dynamics 365 Finance and Operations. Joining me, like last time, is Sukrut and Satish. How are you guys doing today?
Doing good, Judd. Thank you.
And the topic we haven't yet discussed that's getting a lot of attention these days is ALM, also known as Application Lifecycle Management. Keeping track of your environments, managing your source code, keeping your deployment on track, and moving code between environments, that sort of thing. So, Sukrut and Satish, I know you do a lot with ALM. So if somebody said, what is this ALM I hear about? What would you tell them?
Sure. So ALM terminology is very simple, but it has a very, very broad perspective. And it continues when the application starts to get used all the way to when the application is no longer used. So a very broad perspective overall. The goal of this and the module and the ALM is to help increase developer productivity, improve collaboration between teams, and provide transparency for work items. It starts all the way, as far as finance and operation is concerned, it starts all the way from LCS. Sometimes we see ALM is not connected to LCS and whatnot. But for ALM, the tools that we use are DevOps and LCS. From a code perspective, from a build perspective, from a deployment perspective, most of the things happen within DevOps, but there is very tight integration between LCS and DevOps. It all starts with business processes, which may result in some modifications that needs to happen within finance and operations. So business process, kind of gets synced from LCS to DevOps. That's where you kind of capture all your requirements. Out of requirements, you identify these are the modifications required, and that's when the actual ALM kind of starts. As far as finance and operation is concerned, there are three main areas or topics that we want to talk about. The first one is the phases. There are three phases when we consider ALM. It's develop. That's where the development happens, and we'll talk in detail. What exactly happens under development. What are the pros and cons? What we should be doing. What we should not be doing. But once your code is done, then it's build, which means get this ready for your next set of environments. We'll go in detail as well. And then ultimately it's the deployment in different environments. And there's different strategy for different kind of environments. This also comes in conjunction with, so we cannot have ALM just by itself. The ALM that you decide also impacts your environments as well. So what environment is to be used, and with finance and operations getting more and more broader, multiple environments and different type of environments are required. And ultimately we'll talk in detail about the DevOps and LCS and how these tools can be used overall to manage the entire ALM.
Okay, so one question before you get into all that is, what if somebody's listening and say, I don't know if I have ALM strategy or not? What's the alternative to ALM? Or what are people who are not doing it right? What does that look like?
So from an ALM perspective, we would say if you don't know what ALM is and you are doing development, or you are managing the finance and operations development side, then it's not really good, or because you are not following the best practices, or it may be that you are doing all the things, but you just don't understand what is ALM. So ALM basically is you are developing, you are building, and you are deploying. That's what ALM is. You may not understand it from a terminology perspective, but if you are within finance and operations, you most probably are managing your application. If you are not, then this podcast will definitely help you understand more about ALM and what you should be doing and what you should not be doing.
Okay, great.
All right.
Sukrut, you want to add something to it?
Sure. Yeah. So I'll definitely. So the simple strategy or simple methodology we choose to explain the ALM is there are different methodologies, but the simple one we chose is develop, build, and deploy. So the first one comes is develop. So when it comes to the development, the first thing we required for development to start is developer VMs, and there are different options provided for developing, and those VMs comes in different. VMs comes as a cloud-hosted environments. Those can be a Microsoft managed, or you can deploy those within your own subscription, or those VMs can be provisioned on your local infrastructure. So it's going to be on your local machine. You can download those and start developing. So what typically developers does in their day-to-day life is, to start with the development is they have to first configure the workspace and they have to configure their workspace and start planning on how they are going to develop the code. Now, before developing the code, there are some things which needs to be considered or planned. So the most important thing when you start developing with finance and operations is, you need to have your own packages. So the packages is the new concept which was introduced when the finance and operations came. So the package is nothing but a compilation and deployment unit of one or more models. Package does not contain any source code. It just contains the metadata, assemblies, and other resources. And within these packages, we have models. And those models is nothing but a group of source elements such as metadata and source files, and typically constitute a distributable software solutions. So once we create these packages and models, developer can start once they plan how they are going to create these packages and model for the features they are going to develop. Developer can start a development. So typical day for developer starts is logging into developer machines, perform, we'll talk about more about the branching strategy and strategy later, but perform a get let test on their developer machines and start developing features which are assigned to them. Now, once the developers develop some features or code, and the next thing is you want to deploy it in your different environments. Those environments can be UAT environment, or release environment, or pre-prod environment, and those are nothing but the tier 2 environments. So you don't want to build your code from the development environment to production environment without going to your test environment. And for that purpose, we need a builds. So the builds can be performed using build machines. So the build machines are nothing but a VM which comes with your subscription. It's a develop and test machine provided with your subscription. So it has all the setups, for example, build agents and other necessary setups to generate a successful build, which generates the deployable package. You can configure different pipelines within Azure DevOps, which are connected to your build agent and to your branches, and you can perform the build operations. What this build process does is it takes all the source code from the branch and produce a binary file. which is nothing but a deployable package that system can run on, and it can be deployed to any other environment, tier 2 environments using Lifecycle services. So there are so many steps you can configure as a part of build pipelines, and these build pipelines are connected to branches, and build agents uses this build pipeline to generate a build.
How do you determine when that build is generated and what's included in it? And are you bringing your development to a certain point and then saying this is my build, or what?
Sure. So first thing is we need to decide what we want to put in the build, right? So for that purpose, once developer develops their features, they have to collaborate with business users, either by using development VMs for finance and operations, so that the your functional users can test their features on development VMs, or on different standalone machine where they can test those features and approve those features. Once those features are approved, what developer is going to do is usually developer works in development branch. What they are going to do is they are going to merge those approved features in a different branch, which is connected to your user acceptance testing environment, right? UAT environment. So once developer merges those features or code in different branch, what build machine is going to do is we can generate a build. That is the deciding point. So once the developer merges the code, now my different branch is ready with those features, with the code for those features. And that is when the VA decide to generate a build and use that build, the deployable package generated by build, to deploy it in UAT environment. So the users can start, after the deployment finishes, the users can start testing.
Okay.
So this automated builds, there are different ways you can do automated or manual builds. We'll talk about those in detail later. But there are this build server serves multiple purposes. So there are first thing is you can automate different things, like you can embed or you can add multiple steps. There are triggers within the build, so you can add multiple steps for adding your. There is a framework called SysTest framework within finance and operations. You can add your test cases as a part of build. You can run different best practices or custom best practices within these builds. There are different tasks like database synchronization, deploying reports, and there are so many things which are there in the builds which perform by this build server.
And you said that's where the automated testing is tied in as well?
Yes, so you can as a so the finance and operation has SysTest framework, and you can develop your own test cases and run those regression test cases as a part of build. So that saves your manual effort of running the test cases after the build has been deployed in any other environment.
So what percentage of deployments would you estimate use automated testing versus more manual methods?
Well, if we talk about future, Microsoft recommends everyone to be on use these features and make those automated test cases as a part of your build. I know there are some customers, where it is really difficult and they're still not using it. But I would say, more than 50% customer now started using these automated build features for doing automated testing.
The only comment that I would have, Joel, in addition to what Sukrut mentioned, was sometimes customers are not informed about what should happen because ultimately everything starts with a project plan and test, and there is always a budget to factor in. But given the cloud strategy that Microsoft has moved into, and with these platform updates coming 8 times in a year, and you can't skip more than I think 3 platform updates. We have to strive more towards automated testing. Otherwise, what will happen is you run into risk wherein you will deploy something and it will break, or you don't you have to employ additional resources or carve out, your resources have to carve out time so that after the build is completed, before you do a platform update, just to make sure you don't have business disruption, these guys need to test. In one specific scenario, we saw that after every build, there were folks spending, a couple of days just doing full testing for the business processes. And with this automatic testing, that has really cut down that time. Folks doesn't have to, it kind of takes a lot of scheduling out of it from resource perspective, and is really helping. And more customers are now moving towards, let's put the test cases right in so that they can be run as part of test, in addition to whatever other tools you may use down the line for regression testing.
That makes sense.
Right, and another point is it depends really on the customer as well, right? How a customer, so if the customer has in-house team support, so for example, one of the customers I'm working for, they have the in-house team, and although all the necessary tooling is present for automated testing, like Microsoft provided so many different frameworks like RSAT tool, regression suite, automation tool, the sys-test framework, all those things. At customer side, if you have functional users, they are so occupied that it's depend on them as well, that they don't get time to record these test cases, because it's totally the way Microsoft is providing these tools now is, there are some tools where you don't have to write a code, just record a test case, provide a parameters, and those test cases are going to run as a part of your build as well. So if you have a large business processes, there is a time constraint as well. Some functional users, they need time as well to record these test cases. So that's where these blockers are, where the customers are lagging, to adapt to these automated tests and all those things.
Yeah, that makes sense. We're seeing that in a lot of systems, but I think it's the reality that the automated testing still needs somebody to do some work. Every time you update your development, you have to update the test to reflect the latest fields and functionality that you've added. And so you have to have, and there's also the post-deployment support of this, say when the partner isn't as actively involved anymore and the customer is live, they need to be able to support these automated tests, enhance them, without necessarily calling in their partner every time they want to make a change to them. So somebody at the client side typically has to own that process, right?
Right.
So what we have started doing in our implementations even now is, we tend to do all these things as part of our regular project, but we try to identify who from customer side would take the entire ownership on a go-forward basis, so that when the project is live, it's not about the partner have to stay engaged. It's more about the customer is informed, they know how to use all these tools, and they can strive and they can keep learning and keep things in checks after even the project is live.
Okay, great. So I think we've adequately covered the subject of automated testing. So what's the next phase?
Yeah, so next is there are certain things you can do with this build machine. So of course, in the project, we need to decide when, in what order your build needs to occur and at what time, right? So there are some things like where you can schedule, these builds using a specific time. You can also use, triggers for CI/CD, continuous integrations, and for doing continuous integrations. Do gated check-ins. The gated check-ins. Now, what gated check-in means is, it's a secure. When you start a build, when developer check-ins their code, there is a possibility that your build can break. If they check in, if they forgot to add some object, or if they accidentally checked in the code which is not compiled. So the gated check-ins kind of things, these kind of things helps to prevent those mistakes which developer does, wherein as soon as you check in your code, the build starts. And this build is different than what the build we are talking about, which generated by build server. So this gated check-in, when the developer check-ins their code, automatically starts the build on the branch where they are checking in their code. And if there are any errors or if their developers are missing any objects, they will come to know immediately. So these kind of things are needed. These kind of things are needed in when you develop. So another thing is you can there are some do's and don'ts which are you need to follow, and one of the most important thing is do not create deployable packages using your dev VMs. And we have seen this most, and Satish can also comment. We have seen this when we work on on forums and all. People are still using their dev VMs to do deployable packages, and they directly deploy those packages in their UAT environment and production environments, and that creates a lot of mess because you don't know what developer is developing on their developer VMs. So if you are generating deployable packages on your developer VMs, there is a possibility that your code, unnecessary code, can go in that deployable package, which can create a lot of mess. So
what's the alternative? Where should you build them?
So always use branching and do proper, whatever features are approved, just merge those features in your different branches which are dedicated for your test environment or pre-prod environment, and use build server to generate those deployable packages.
Okay, great.
Correct.
Great. So go ahead.
The only issue that I see, why folks may still do this, number one, the option is provided by Visual Studio. Because that's what they are able to do. Number two, I think the Microsoft documentation on the docs website also provides this option, but we have seen numerous folks from Microsoft now taking a lead and making sure that the projects are not doing or creating deployable packages from the dev machines. Instead, it's now moving more towards build. But I think that docs page needs to get updated as well. So we'll probably put in comments so that Microsoft can at least have a disclaimer in there. This is not supposed to be used for creating the deployable packages for other environments. If you want to verify something, well and good, but don't create something and then keep on deploying. Otherwise, you run into a lot of risks.
So, related question to that: how do you handle multiple work streams? Where you don't just have one dev team, but maybe you have two teams working on things that aren't directly related, but have some overlapping areas.
Right. So that is when the branching strategy comes into the picture, and so from your regular, so there are different teams which are working on different projects, or if from your regular work, apart from your regular production environment, if you are working on different projects. Of course, the work has to be managed in different branches, and that is when the reverse branching strategy comes into the picture, where once the changes are ready from your different projects, you need to kind of plan a strategy wherein you have to merge those changes from different projects in your regular branch or regular main branch, which is connected to your test environment. Once and that the main branch which is connected to your UAT environment or user testing environment, that particular branch is going to contain your regular things as a regular code base as well. So once that thing goes into the production, you have to plan your branching again, where you can create your developer branch again from your production or UAT branch. And so in that case, little bit manual effort is involved, wherein developer has to, if they are working on any new features, they have to, just copy and paste those features in those new branches and check in those features in new branches. And that's how you merge the work from different project in your regular branches and whenever it is ready.
One thing that we have seen in some cases is customers or even in some cases partners don't pay attention to what will happen over a time period. So say for example phase 1 is live, everything, there are still some hot fixes or you are still making modifications and they are kind of going into that branch. Then you have a parallel branch wherein you are really developing for phase 2. Very typical for the branch 1 is finance related and branch 2 is more of a supply chain related. I think there needs to be proper attention given to when the code merge will happen. What would be the strategy from an ALM perspective? Because what you don't want to have happen is project 1, everything is good. Project 2, everything is good. Everything has been tested, but they have never been merged. No collaborative testing or no integrated testing between those branches have happened. You definitely want to kind of avoid those situations. Otherwise, just prior to your go lives, you will run into issues. So always plan what your branching strategy is, how you will merge codes, and how the integrated testing needs to happen before you go live with your subsequent phases.
Okay.
All right, and there are some important points, which we should not do while working with these branches and deployable packages. So, like not marking deployable packages from. So when we plan to deploy anything in productions in LCS and LCS, we have to mark we have to upload those packages and mark those packages as release candidates for the production environment. And sometimes people do mistake. And so there are different deployable packages for UAT and production environment, because not necessarily all the things which are merged by developers into the UAT environments are going to go in production, right? So there are certain things which users may approve and certain things which users may not. So in that case, what happens is if people mark deployable packages which belongs to UAT environment as release candidate to production environment, you may end up in having the features which users don't want or the features which are not ready for productions. Those features are going to deploy in production. So always remember to not mark deployable packages from test branch or main branch as a release candidate. Another thing is like once the features are approved, usually we create another deployable package which goes to the release branch or release environment, which is nothing but a pre-prod environment or your future production environment. And that is where the people do mistake, where they don't do any testing because they think that we already tested these features in our UAT environment and there is no need to test. But do not skip testing of those deployable packages in your release environment because that is the most important thing. And there is a possibility that although those features worked on UAT environment, there is a possibility that it might break some other business processes. So it's always good to have, do testing and do not skip testing in your release environment.
So you mentioned several different environments here. What are the typical number and types of environments that you'd recommend people have in a deployment of F&amp?
So from an environment perspective, we would say, there will be development environments. That's where development will happen. Then there is build environment, which will help, take everything from your dev branch and then put it into another environment. Then you need to have your UAT environment, which again, that's where you test it again. Then you have, you still need to do another build on top of it, just based on all the features that are approved. But you can still utilize the previous build server. And then there is pre-production environment that what Sukrut mentioned about. So it all depends upon how much attention customer is giving to the entire ALM methodology. And it all depends upon how smooth you want your operations to have. What used to happen previously was folks would deploy something to production environment, and we have heard complaints in some cases. Okay, something broke in production environment. Well, what exactly happened? Because you did not plan your environments well. You did not have your environment strategy, which kind of already comes with your ALM. But very typical to have, I'll say, multiple developer machines, one build server, one UAT server, one pre-production, and another one is production.
Right. So, and with the standard subscription, you get three machines. So one is tier 1 environment, which is development test. One is tier 2, which you can use as a UAT environment, and the third one is going to be production. And apart from that, it's up to you how much is your, how big is your development team, and depending on that, you have to install you have to deploy your developer machines. And depending on your need, you can deploy more add-on environments, which are tier 2 environments for pre-prod and all. So those has to be deployed separately. Those doesn't come with the standards subscription.
Okay, so I believe where we were left off, the phases we were testing now, right?
It was in the build. But we kind of moved a little bit into testing as well, because with build you can do testing as well. Right. But we were, out of the three phases, I think we have discussed develop as well as the build.
So the next is going to be deployment.
Okay.
So deployment is tricky. You want to definitely make sure you have your strategies. There are two approaches that are kind of available as far as deployment is concerned. One is manual deployment. What you do is, you do your build, you download your deployable package, you upload it to LCS, and then you push it to whatever environments you want to push it in. That's one way. The second one is automated deployments. The only disclaimer that I would have here is that at this point, you can do automated deployments in any environment except production environment, because that's still controlled by Microsoft. What we should be doing is we should be striving for automated deployments. Over a time period, you have so many environments, team projects are getting bigger and bigger. So strive for automated deployments. There are tools that are available on the marketplace that folks may not be aware of, but they have been available there for quite some time now. Download those. They get integrated right with DevOps, and they will get you to automated ALM. Ultimately, what you need to do is just run the build and release, and what will happen is it will deploy into different environments. There is documentation that is available for the tools that Microsoft have provided. It's available on Visual Studio Marketplace for Azure DevOps, and I think it's called Dynamics 365 Finance and Operations Tools. So we know that Microsoft have changed the names of the product, but I think the tool is still called Finance and Operation Tools.
Okay. Yeah, and these tools are useful for uploading the packages and deploying those to the most important part is non-prod environment. So the prod environment deployment has to be still scheduled, but these automated build deployment is applicable only to non-prod tier 2 environments.
Okay. How do you make sure that by the time you get to the production deployment that you're pretty confident that things are going to go smoothly? Is your pre-prod environment a full copy of your production environment, or how do you keep your pre-prod environment to closely mimic what's in production to make sure we won't have problems when we get to production?
So the pre-prod environment plays important role here. So the pre-prod environment is always going to be your replica of prod environment, except when you want to deploy new features. So as I mentioned earlier, when we have to deploy the approved features and generate a new deployable package for our pre-prod environment, and that is when we deploy that package, only that is the time when your pre-prod environment is going to be different than your prod environment. So at that time, it's going to be your future prod environment with new features. And that is where you should not skip testing, even though those features are already tested in your UAT environment.
So if you go ahead and do deployment, you find out there's a problem, how does your pre-prod environment get back in sync and not have that release? Do you want to install that release, or how does that work?
So there are two ways. One is to deploy your previous deployable package, and but instead of doing that, the preferable way is, if the issue is not critical, or if it is you can fix it immediately and deploy, because there is a possibility that certain transactions are already done for the new features, right? So and after analyze the issue, do the quick fixes, and immediately on the same day, you can schedule a downtime and release the new fixes. And if there is if the issue is critical and that caused a damage, for a data as well, then definitely you have to take corrective actions on the data, and you have to write scripts and plan accordingly to fix your data.
And let's just say worst case, we don't catch something, or something happens, we go to production and there's a problem. What are our options there?
Right. So that the option is, there is no uninstall. You have to deploy your previous package, and kind of roll back the new deployable package. That is the only way to deploy a new package. But you cannot uninstall a deployable package once deployed.
And how do you determine what the best time to schedule a deployment? I know internally we do it over the weekends or something, and then send out an email that the system is going to be down for a certain window of time or something like that. Is that typically what people do?
Yeah, that is the typical way of doing deployments. Usually, I'll give you an example of the customer which I work for. So usually, typically, we schedule release, Saturday early morning, 4:00, and so by the time, it requires 5 hours of downtime, but it really doesn't require that much time. Within 2 hours, the environment is available, and Microsoft is heavily investing and reducing that downtime as well, with minimal downtime or no downtime for the deployments. Unless there is a critical things, we usually prefer to do deployments during weekends.
Yeah, that's fine. And how often you don't want to be updating frequently? What's the normal cadence of releases that you're seeing customers do once they're live? When you're going live, you're building a deployment and then going live. But then after that, as you have updates that you're doing, do you schedule those monthly, quarterly? What's the typical cadence?
It depends. I have seen some customers where they follow 2-week sprint, and they do releases every 2 weeks. And some customers, they do releases every month. And I have seen customers doing releases every weekend as well. So they just want a continuous delivery of their features or bugs. So they decide, okay, in this week we are going to work on this 4 or 5 different issues and couple of new features, and test those and release those on weekly or bi-weekly basis.
Okay.
But what has happened now, at least with the cloud version, is that the releases are much better planned. Earlier, what used to happen is, in the previous versions, You are able to do build in your production environment. You are able to do synchronization in your production environment at any point of time. So something is broken. Okay, let's deploy it tonight. You deploy it, and then you are kind of done. Something doesn't work out tomorrow. Folks still deployed it the next day. But now you have, Microsoft is kind of managing all your deployments. So you definitely want to make sure that you have done enough testing, and then only you deploy it. In some cases, that also means that you have to push back on business. If someone is really pushing to do the deployments real quick, at least from a partner perspective, make sure that your customer is aware of what risk they may run into if they don't do good testing, and keep on doing ad hoc deployments.
Right. So if somebody's listening and they're saying, "Oh, Sukrut and Satish I really feel bad now because I don't have good ALM processes." Maybe they're doing manual deployments where they should be doing automated. Maybe they're not doing automated testing. Maybe they don't have enough environments. How hard is it for a existing deployment that doesn't follow good ALM processes to move to good ALM processes?
So from that perspective, we would say if you have not, the first thing would be, make yourself aware of what are the tools available and how you can use those tools. Once you have them in place, come up with a good branching strategy. You definitely want to make sure that, if you are creating your development branches in this case, because that's how everything kind of flows. Whatever you have done so far, you have not done yet. You have been doing, packages, building that directly from your Visual Studio. So agree that may be the case, but shouldn't be the case. But if you're still doing it, create your branches. Try to streamline your code, whatever you think is in your production environment right now. Check that into your dev environment so that at least you have some kind of a baseline to start with, and then take it from there to next release. It will take some planning. You wouldn't be able to do it on day one. You want to understand what the build servers are, what your options are. But I think if you spend time within a couple of weeks, you should be able to get into a really good ALM process for your implementation.
So what about third-party tools for source control? We very frequently come across customers who have non-Microsoft source code repositories, or maybe use GitHub or something like that. If all their tooling and all their other applications, they use some third-party tool or something other than DevOps, are there options to use that for your source management as well?
You can, of course, if you are developing a third-party tool which is not, connected to finance operation, you can still use DevOps for that. There is no limitation on using different branch for developing those tools. But if you are developing an ISV product, which is, of course, works with the finance and operations, then you have to, the best practice we recommend is to get so ISV can provide code in two different ways. One is they can provide their source code directly to you, or they can provide a deployable package. If they provide a deployable package, you have to install that deployable package. The first thing you have to do is deploy that deployable package, install that deployable package in your developer VM, and check in that as a part of your dev branch, so that you can use that deployable package or code from the binaries from ISV in your own package. Because the recommendation from Microsoft is also just deploy a single package while you are doing deployment in productions. So don't create multiple deployable packages, create a single deployable package. So that is where what we do is we get the binary code from binary files from ISV, install those in dev machines, make that part of our branch, and once that code is or binaries part of our branch, we merge those in our main branch, which is pointed to the build server. And after that, build server takes care of everything and include that as a single deployable package, including your own code as well as the ISV code. Of course, you can maintain third-party tooling code in your branches, Azure DevOps, on the same project, same finance and operation project which you are working on, and we do that on regular basis. So let's touch up with on the version control side a little bit. Satish, do you want to go ahead with the version controlling part?
Sure. I think we kind of touched a little bit upon it earlier. There are still some projects, they don't use version control, but we don't see that often right now. More and more projects they are getting into the version control because ultimately, customer needs to take the ownership and they need to make sure that their production environment doesn't run into any kind of issues. What it helps with is, primary purpose for version control is your source code, right? You want to make sure all your customizations are properly tracked and in version control. You can, developers typically tend to check in change set sometimes on a daily basis, but you want to make sure that, they use or they align those change set with a proper work item. So we know when a feature is getting approved that everything is kind of getting pushed to the build from a version control standpoint. ISV is another thing. Whether you get your licenses, what we have seen earlier is, in some cases, folks try to see, okay, how do we apply our licenses, our ISV licenses? Well, that can be part of your version control. It can be part of your build and can automatically be deployed. Another aspect is the binaries or the source code that Sukrut touched upon. Again, make sure that you are using version control even for your binaries that the ISV may have supplied, or if you are using, or if they have supplied the code that you kind of put that one in the version control as well. What do you typically use? From a version control standpoint, we would say DevOps is the direction that Microsoft is taking a lead on. DevOps and F&O, everything that's applicable to DevOps is applicable to finance and operations, even though it's a separate product from Microsoft DevOps and might be used for so many other projects or applications. But whatever is applicable for DevOps is applicable for finance and operations as well. It includes few basic licenses that allow you access to code. You can always purchase additional, but if you really want to strive for 100% automated LM, version control is your best friend. So understand version control in detail. Make sure everything is controlled. That way, even if someone leaves the organization or something happens, the customers, the partners knows what exactly is in source control. So you definitely want to make sure developers don't keep the code on their workstations. They check it on a daily basis. There are various tool set available wherein you can run automatic build just to make sure that they don't check in the incomplete code into the version control. Shell set is another tool or terminology that you can use to manage the code as well. So that's what I would summarize at a very, very high level from a version control. I think there are some do's and don'ts as well that, Sukrut, if you want to kind of go in a little bit more detail, that we would recommend to our customers or to the listeners from a version control standpoint.
Yeah, that's great. We're running short on time here, so I'm sure we could talk. You sound like you could talk about ALM for long. This has been very, very helpful. We got through the deployment, but I think there's still more around version control and after deployment, what is needed to keep the strategy going. But I really appreciate you coming on the podcast again. And do you have any before you go? Do you have any new blog posts you've recently written or things that we can share with listeners too?
We don't have any good any written blog post yet, but there are some good docs articles which we'll share as a part of this podcast, which will definitely help who wants to start and plan their ALM strategy.
Okay. Well, great. Well, Sukrut and Satish, I really appreciate you joining us on CRM Audio, and this is we'll get this added to the show notes, and please give me those links so that we can have complete information. Thank you for listening to CRM Audio.
Thanks, Chad.